Welcome back to Education Matters. Did you correctly answer D, $145 million? The General Assembly has set recurring new investments of $10 million each year for the next 10 years until it reaches $145 million annually. To give you a comparison, that's about the same amount that we pay all of the state's principals in North Carolina in a year. We're going to continue our discussion about the Opportunity Scholarship Program, this time focusing on the curriculum. And we have two wonderful guests. We have Bonnie Bechard. Bonnie is the study author that we're going to talk about this report today, and a member of the Education Action Team for the League of Women Voters. She's in the Lower Cape Fear. Sitting next to her is Dr. Mary Kolek. Dr. Kolek is with the League of Women Voters of North Carolina. She's the team lead for education, and I should also point out that Dr. Kolek is a former school superintendent in Connecticut. So thank you. And she decided to come down here to North Carolina as fast as she could. So we're glad to have you here. All right, I'm going to start with you. Really the same question that I started with Tripp Stallings, Bonnie, is what did you set out to accomplish with this review and study of the curriculum that private voucher schools are using?
Well, I started to study vouchers in general. And so I didn't know what I would find, and what I found was, I think, shocking and adds something new to the conversation. I pretty quickly discovered that a majority of the vouchers were going to schools using what they identified as a biblical worldview curriculum, using the Bechard textbooks, and I was curious as to what that was. And then I came across a critique of the biology textbook by Professor William Snyder at the UNC School of Medicine. It was highly critical, and he said that it would not prepare the students for biology level courses, and that public money should not be going to that curriculum. And then I discovered the University of California court case, and where that university does not accept the curriculum, not only in science, but also in history, and in literature and in civics. And if that school has those high standards, what about other top universities?
Right, and so I said, so finding out these things, first of all, so what was the percentage, sort of what schools, Bonnie, that were using this type of curriculum? Let's get that baseline first.
All right, in the sample we used, we looked at 75% of the schools receiving vouchers, 75% of the vouchers. I figured that was a large enough sample. And of those, 76.7% of the money was going to voucher schools. And this represents by 2028, close to $1 billion will be going to those schools. Right.
Dr. Kolek, you're an educator, that's your career. I mean, this is, I guess what's the problem? I mean, if you see it as a problem, which I think the League of Women Voters put this out because you're raising some concerns, and I think Bonnie pointed out some concerns about whether children are being adequately prepared. From your perspective, sort of what is the concern about this particular curriculum that's so apparently such a dominant player in the private schools?
Well, first let me ground it in the idea that the League of Women Voters Education Action Team has position statements, and one of those statements is really about ensuring that all students have access to high quality education that prepares them for citizenship in the 21st century. So when you look at the curriculum that we're talking about, it's really essential that you go back and say, based on what we know as best practice standards and scholarly advice and research in the education field, what should curriculum look like? And the fundamental core standards that you use, as well as the goals that are around not just content, but thinking skills, higher order thinking skills that we know all students need. Right. Just are not met by this curriculum.
Right, and the North Carolina has a standard course of study and actually it's interesting, the Catholic schools that we talked about in this first segment, they actually follow and meet guidelines, which I think is, I want to make sure that our viewers understand. You're not, there's not suggesting that there's no place if parents, families want to have sort of a religious education for their children. Your suggestion is that it should be separated from, okay, this is what sort of the curriculum should be. Is that, or I don't want to put words in your mouth. You're saying that this is different than saying you've got religious instruction here and you've got science and math here. Is that?
Well, even in the University of California court case, that question came up, and they said emphatically this is not about religion. In fact, they do accept textbooks that have religious content. That's fine, but it should meet academic standards. It shouldn't have errors. It shouldn't have omissions of the subject, and it should exhibit academic rigor.
And I think there's a larger, I think the idea that this is not about religion, there's an accountability and a transparency standard that your previous guest mentioned that we're in full agreement with, that this is really taking a look at it and saying that those standards and the policy has to stipulate how those standards are going to be met. All schools should be held to the same academic standards with that foundational core that's an approved course of study or one that's equal to that.
If they're receiving public dollars, which I think is what you mentioned. $1 billion, it does, I mean, it does beg the question, you know, shouldn't the state, if they're going to spend that kind of money, they have a constitutional obligation to make sure kids receive a proper education. There's not a lot of standards in place right now around this curriculum. Is that what you found? That
is what we found. For example, in the Bechard textbooks, I tried to find information about the authors, and I could find virtually no information. There's no standard. There are no standards I could find, and the very few I did find information about, I could find no vitae or bios, and they were all from Pensacola Christian College, who is also the author of the textbooks. Right. A huge contrast to what goes into the North Carolina course of study, which is an amazing course of study.
When I read through your report, I mean, because one of the things that I got is it felt like that some of the texts that were sampled and the other professors, what they're shaping the content to fit the Bible versus saying that they can exist alongside of each other. Because I'm a Christian, I'm a person of faith. I think obviously you can reconcile both. But the problem with this curriculum in your views was that it's narrow, and it's saying we're going to make this science fit.
Right. Okay. And I think it's important to note that the voucher schools are not held to any of these standards. There's no curriculum standards. There's not standards about teacher quality or certification. So when you look at that, there's a guarantee to our citizens. People should just be aware of that.
Right. And we are, unfortunately, we are out of time. That goes by fast. Go to our website, viewers. You can read the report. It's fascinating. I think the people should know about it. I mean, if this is our taxpayers' dollars, so they should understand what's being taught. But thank you both for your work and for being here today. Thank you. After the break, this week's Leadership Spotlight.